President Biden today accepted House Speaker Pelosi's invitation to give the State of the Union address on the 1st of March. It'll be the latest in the year by any president since 1934, but in so many ways, we've already been reckoning with the State of the Union. Now, in a moment, you're going to see the sheer spectacle of a sitting Republican U.S. Senator, one of the most powerful individuals in the country, representing one of the biggest states in the nation, pretty much groveling at the feet of a right-wing cable TV entertainer, which certainly reflects the State of the Union. First, though, how the president summed it up in his remarks on the anniversary of the Capitol insurrection.
Are we going to be a nation that accepts political violence as a norm? Are we going to be a nation where we allow partisan election officials to overturn the legally expressed will of the people? Are we going to be a nation that lives not by the light of the truth, but in the shadow of lies? You can't love your country only when you win. You can't obey the law only when it's convenient. You can't be patriotic when you embrace and enable lies.
Now, the president went on to say that autocrats are betting that this country will become more like theirs, but he said that's not who we are. Now, given the substance of his own remarks and the climate surrounding them, maybe the answer is, yeah, it is, at least for a substantial number of people in the country, especially within, sadly to say, the Republican Party. And in that spirit tonight, I give you Senator Ted Cruz, assuming the position last night before Fox entertainer Tucker Carlson, who had already raked him over the coals the night before. Senator Cruz's alleged sin was having the gumption, or whatever you want to call it, having dared on Wednesday to refer to the assault on the Capitol as a terrorist attack. Something, it turns out, he's done 17 times before. But you know what they say about 18 times? Actually, they don't say anything about 18 times. But Tucker Carlson noticed it this time, perhaps, and that was enough to trigger this whacked-out spectacle.
You never use words carelessly, and yet you called this a terror attack when by no definition was it a terror attack. That's a lie. You told that lie on purpose, and I'm wondering why you did.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me on. When you aired your episode last night, I sent you a text shortly thereafter and said, listen, I'd like to go on because the way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. And
I don't buy that. Whoa. I don't buy that. Look, I've known you a long time, since before you went to the Senate. You were a Supreme Court contender. You take words as seriously as any man who's ever served in the Senate. And every word, you repeated that phrase. I do not believe that you used that accidentally. I just don't.
So, Tucker, as a result of my sloppy phrasing, it's caused a lot of people to misunderstand what I meant. Let me tell you what I meant to say. I wasn't saying that the thousands of peaceful protesters supporting Donald Trump are somehow terrorists. I wasn't saying the millions of patriots across the country supporting President Trump are terrorists, and that's what a lot of people have misunderstood that comment.
Wait a second, but hold on. What you just said doesn't make sense.
So, Tucker, let me answer you directly. The reason I use that word, for a decade, I have referred to people who violently assault police officers as terrorists. I've done so over and over and over again. If you look at all the assaults we've seen across the country, I've called that terrorism over and over again. That being said, Tucker, I agree with you. It was a mistake to say that yesterday, and the reason is what you just said, which is we've now had a year of Democrats and the media twisting words and trying to say that all of us are terrorists.
He did there, his back's in the corner. Tucker's giving him that quizzical look. He practices so hard. And then he did the twist, hoping that by blaming the media, blaming Democrats, Carlson would get back on his side. It didn't work. According to CNN's Daniel Dale, Ted Cruz has called the Capitol assault a terrorist attack at least 17 previous times in official written statements and tweets and remarks at Senate hearings and in interviews. But the issue isn't his hypocrisy, really, only his abject subordination of himself. A sitting U.S. senator, one of only 100, someone with actual influence, a former presidential candidate nonetheless, groveling at the feet of Tucker Carlson, which is quite a come down after groveling at the feet of the actual president. But totally in character all the same. Remember when candidate Trump insulted his wife's looks?
I don't get angry often. But you mess with my wife, you mess with my kids, that'll do it every time. Donald, you're a sniveling coward, and leave Heidi the hell alone.
How many times do you think he practiced that one? Probably a lot. The former president also insinuated that Cruz's father was involved in President Kennedy's assassination, among other false claims and insults. And remember recently he said that running for president Losing was like the greatest experience of his life, the most fun he's had in years. I don't think it was probably that fun for his wife. For a brief period, Senator Cruz stood firm, then he crumbled. A year ago, he was leading the effort to overturn the election on January 6th. By last February, he was fully supine.
And you know what? There are a whole lot of voices in Washington that want to just erase the last 4 years. Want to go back to the world before, and they look at Donald J. Trump and they look at the millions and millions of people inspired who went to battle fighting alongside President Trump, and they're terrified. And they want him to go away. Let me tell you this right now, Donald J. Trump ain't going anywhere.
So yeah, Ted Cruz has the spine of a cantaloupe. Now remember the time that he blamed his daughters as the reason he was quickly trying to get on a plane to Mexico for vacation during the state's power crisis?
Yesterday, my daughters asked if they could take a trip with some friends, and Heidi and I agreed, so I flew down with them last night.
Yeah, wasn't the case. His smarmy hypocrisy, it's not really the issue here. I mean, it's interesting to look at, and we've seen it time and time again. But the real issue is why. I mean, the answer: why would he be so docile and to Tucker Carlson? And the reason is because at the end of the day, the power of the Republican Party is now at the fringes. That's where the energy is. Energy that the Ted Cruzes of the world are betting will drive voters to the polls. Or a year ago, drove mobs to storm the very institution that Senator Cruz is supposed to serve. Here now with some of the numbers behind all this, CNN, the senior data reporter, Harry Enton. Man, Harry, I was almost going to say I felt bad for Cruz, but I mean, he's so smarmy and hypocritical, it's hard to. I don't take glee in his sweaty, failures, but is there any data to shed light on why Cruz might be so quick to backpedal on himself?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, remember 6 years ago, which feels like so long ago, even though it was only 6 years ago, the very conservative Republicans loved Ted Cruz. He actually beat Donald Trump amongst them in the Republican primary, 42% to 36%. But then you jump forward to the general elections of both 2016 and 2020, and the very conservative Republicans, look at this. In 2016, Trump got 97% of their vote. In 2020, he got 99% of their vote. You don't have to be a mathematician to know that's pretty much nearly unanimous. Donald Trump is in charge of this Republican Party, and that's what's going on with Ted Cruz.
So for any would-be 2024 Republican presidential contender, how important to very conservative voters is some sort of perceived allegiance to the former president? I mean, that would seem to be critical.
It's extremely important. In fact, we asked that question essentially in our poll back in September. Is supporting Trump an important part of being a Republican? Among very conservative Republicans, look at this. 60% said very important. 22% said somewhat important. So important anyway is north of 80%. And when it comes to, say, the election of 2020, obviously Donald Trump has put out that garbage that it was somehow a fraud, which obviously isn't true. Did Biden legitimately win enough votes to win the presidency? Among very conservative Republicans, 87% said no. 67% said no. There is solid evidence he did not. Now, I don't know what the heck they're seeing. Solid evidence? What are they, nuts? But 67% believe it.
I was also just fascinated that, Ted Cruz has Tucker Carlson's, I guess, his cell phone number, just like, Ingram and all of them had the president's number and Mark Meadows' number, and they're all in cahoots on this. In the appearance on Fox, Cruz was obviously adding to the disinformation about the attack on January 6th. Can you talk a little bit about how many Republicans actually believe those lies?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you ask Republican voters, essentially, do you believe what happened on January 6th was extremely or very violent? Overall, across everybody, it's 64%, but only 39% of Republicans believe that. But then I think you can go even deeper to get to the real fringes of the Republican Party and the Trump voters, and you essentially ask, was there pretty much any violence that was committed? Or did everyone act peacefully? And look at that. Yeah, the vast majority of Trump voters say that there were some injured police officers at 72%. But 23%, a substantial portion of Trump voters say that everyone acted peacefully. I don't know what they need to see. The proof is right there in the pudding. Yet a quarter of them somehow do not believe that there were, in fact, some violent folks on January 6th.
And just lastly, looking ahead to 2024, where do things stand between the former president and Senator Cruz?
Yeah, Donald Trump is in a very good position. He's at north of 50% of the Republican vote right now, by my estimate. Look at Ted Cruz. He's just at 3%. But perhaps if he texts Tucker Carlson some more, maybe he can get his way up to, say, 4 or 5%.
Wow. Harry Hansen, appreciate it. Thank you. Coming
Thank
up.